Hi, welcome back to the channel. In today's episode, I want to talk to you about what's happening in the Russian economy and specifically to talk about the devastating impact that the drone attacks by Ukraine are now having on not just the Russian oil industry, but Russian industry as a whole. If I have a look at this chart, it shows the number of recorded successful drone attacks dating back to June 2022. So you can see that in 2022 and 2023, there weren't very many drone attacks that actually hit the targets that they were intended to. Back in those days, the technology was relatively early stage, and a lot of the drones were the sort of very low level ones that you see people flying over if they're spying on you whilst you're sunbathing naked in your garden. Those sort of drones that you see people trying to hit with brooms. So they just strapped some explosives to those sorts of drones and they weren't having a lot of success. But you can see that in June 22, there was one oil and gas processing plant that was recorded as being hit. A major pipeline infrastructure was recorded at the start of 2023, and a few oil and gas processing plants in the middle of 23, but very little in the way of success. There was one tanker that was recorded later that year as well. Now, 2024 was when things started to improve. So, Ukraine has focused a lot of energy. It's got a lot of its really bright people working on this. It commandeered a lot of companies that were involved in technology to start making drones. And so they started ramping up the level of sophistication of these drones. And if you've seen some of the footage, you'll know that some of them these days are actually, they look quite impressive. They're basically like aircraft, that they unmanned aircraft, obviously, that you can fly. And one of the key issues with regards to drone warfare is being able to direct it to its end target. And you can see that in 2024, the level of success increased significantly compared with the previous 2 years. But as you can see, most of the targets were black, and the color coding here, black is oil and gas processing plants. So basically, the refineries. That was what Ukraine was focusing its efforts on back in 2024, trying to hit those refineries to cause some sort of damage, which would then mean that that refinery would have to shut for a period of time and cause Russia to lose revenue from not being able to produce gasoline and diesel and all of those sorts of things. So 2024 represented an okay year, but we're still talking a relatively small number of strikes. But if we look at 2025, things have changed significantly. At the start of the year, Russia started to have more success and it started to see other types of targets. So, not just oil and gas refineries, we had some sea infrastructure. So, it was going after the ports, that's shown by the pink sections, and it was also going after the pipelines, the oil pipelines. So, this was still predominantly focused on just the stationary assets of the oil industry. But if we look at the last 4 months, you can see that there has been a massive increase in the strike rate for these drones. And we've got lots of different colors here. So we've got sea infrastructure, oil and gas refineries, the tankers, and the pipelines. So there's a real variety here of the assets that Ukraine is targeting. And if we have a look at this list, you can see that they are now going for lots of different types of assets. This table shows all of the successfully recorded strikes in December and January. So things have really ramped up over the past couple of months. And the color coding here shows the different types of assets. You can see that we've got multicolors. So Ukraine is going after everything now, not just the refineries. It's going after the ports, it's going after tankers. Some oil rigs were actually hit recently, they were out at sea. And what that means from Russia's point of view is that they really don't know where the next strike is coming from. And that's causing them major problems now. And it's causing lots of outages. And the production of Russian oil in December actually fell to its lowest level for 18 months. It represented a fall of 100,000 barrels per day compared with the output in November. Now, if we take a very simple example, if we assume that that oil was valued at $60 in the international market, which is broadly where the market price of oil is, not Russian oil, we'll come on to talk about that in a moment. But if you're losing 100,000 barrels per day at $60, that equates to a loss of $6 million per day. So over the course of a year, that would be $2.2 billion that Russia is losing as a result of that 100,000 barrel per day cut in production. But actually, the situation is far worse than that because Russia is a member of OPEC, and OPEC has allowed Russia to increase its production targets because it wants to increase the amount of oil that everybody is selling. And Russia came in 250,000 barrels per day below the OPEC level. So OPEC wants it to be producing more. It isn't. And historically, Russia has actually produced more than OPEC has allowed it to. It's been a bit naughty on that front. And 250,000 barrels at $60 per barrel would equate to $15 million per day. And that's an annual total of 5.5 billion of revenue lost because Russia is no longer operating at the capacity that it's allowed to. But the situation is worse than that if you look at where Russia was back at the start of 2023. It was producing 10 million barrels of oil per day compared with 9.3 today. So that's a fall of 700,000 barrels per day, which at $60 per barrel would be $42 million per day of lost revenue. And over the course of a year, that equates to $15 billion. So we're talking some serious numbers here as a result of the production problems that Russia are now encountering because of the drone attacks. And this is combining with the increase in the sanctions, which is making it more difficult for Russia to find buyers because India and China and Turkey are now stepping back from buying Russian oil because they know that they're going to be hit with secondary sanctions if it's proven that they continue to buy Russian oil. So Russia is suffering as a result of not being able to produce enough oil as a result of the breakdowns and the problems caused by the drone attacks. But in addition to that, it's also pulling back on production because it doesn't have anywhere to store this oil. Currently, Russia has over 200 million barrels of oil out at sea. So it's loaded it onto tankers. Those tankers are sailing around, but they don't actually have anywhere to go to because the orders haven't been confirmed. The countries are pulling back from buying that Russian oil because they're worried that if they take delivery, then they will be seen to be dealing with Russia, therefore will be hit with secondary sanctions, and so won't be able to do any business themselves. And as we've talked about in previous videos, the majority of India and China's exports do not go to Russia. They go to the rest of the world. Russia represents around about 2 or 3% of China's exports. So that means that 97 or 98% of China's exports go everywhere else. And its biggest single market is the USA. And if China continues dealing with Russia, it's putting all of those export markets at risk. So it doesn't want to do that. And we've seen Donald Trump is not afraid to follow through on these threats. So we recently saw it with Iran, that he said basically anybody that continues dealing with Iran would be hit with a 25% tariff. And so what that means is that Iran will lose all of its overseas sales because nobody wants to lose its sales to the USA. It's the most attractive market in the world. So Russia is now falling foul of this same problem. So we've got a double whammy here. It's got production problems as a result of these increased drone strikes and also because of the pullback in demand for Russian oil. And the problem that Russia is now facing is that Ukraine has become the world's experts on military drones because they've been working on this constantly for the past 4 years. They didn't have a lot of success in the early days, but they're now starting to see the benefits of that expertise. They've got drones that can travel over 1,000 miles, and they are successfully going that sort of distance and hitting refineries and tankers and oil wells and oil rigs. So Russia doesn't really know where the next attack is coming from. It's being hit on all fronts. And there's been a commitment from the European Union to provide another $1 million worth of funding for these drones, which means that Ukraine over the next 12 months is forecast to have hundreds of thousands of these drones. It's got a target of producing 1 million drones. And 1 million drones is a lot of drones to be hitting all of this different infrastructure. And Russia is really struggling now with regards to managing the problem because as time goes on, it's going to get more and more of these attacks. And it's just not sustainable because Russia is spending more than it's earning because of the war in Ukraine. It has a budget deficit. And as these drones impact on the production and therefore the sale of oil and gas, then their revenue will be going down whilst their income stays as high. And as I talked about in other videos, the National Wealth Fund is now depleted. And so the only way that Russia is funding this is through the issuance of debt. And debt is very expensive at the moment in Russia because interest rates are sitting at 16%. So all of this is combining to be an absolute nightmare from Russia's perspective. And unless it comes to some sort of agreement to end the war, things are only going to get worse as Ukraine continues to develop its drone warfare technology, continues to have success in taking out these Russian assets, which will further hurt production and reduce revenue further, in addition to what's happening with the sanctions and the pullback in terms of demand for Russian oil and gas. So hopefully you've enjoyed today's video, you found it useful, informative, and most importantly, thought-provoking. If you have liked what I've said, then please give me a thumbs up. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. It really helps me with the algorithm. Don't forget, I'm running my competition whereby you can win my house located close to one of the best beaches in the UK, or £250,000, whichever you prefer. It's another way of helping me and funding the channel. So if you'd like to get involved, please scan the QR code on the screen now or click the link in the description below. Thank you so much to everyone that supported me in other ways. If you bought me a coffee, sent me a YouTube super thanks, or signed up as a patron, YouTube member, or buy me a coffee member, really appreciate that support. Thank you so much. And here's something to put a smile on your face.